Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. Now, I know we're coming to the end of August and summer is disappearing, but September's coming. And I love September. It's one of my favourite months. You still have glorious weather, but cooler nights and that lovely light, which just makes everything seem as though it's lit from within. But here at Longmeadow, it is the driest month of the year. Because it's so dry here, we have to water, and this is the harvest season. We want to keep things going for as long as possible. But it is important to water wisely. Don't worry about brassica at this stage, or even root crops, but water plants like courgettes, or lettuce, or sweet corn, where the moisture will actively benefit the condition and quality of the harvest. And also, never sprinkle. Water in a jet, if possible, with a watering can or a hose pipe, at the roots, so all the water goes into the roots and then into the plant. And finally, if you can, water in the morning or the evening. This week, we meet a gardener in Derbyshire who's been growing and showing gladioli all his life.
The world of gladioli showing can get very competitive, but those rivals are some of my best friends.
And Carol is at Glebe Cottage, celebrating that late summer jewel, the Crocosmia.
How could you resist growing something like that? Perfection.
I shall be taking cuttings from pelargoniums to make sure that I have a decent supply for next year. And also, I've come up with a solution to that age-old problem of dry shade. We tend to think of bulbs as something that belongs to spring. And in fact, we're soon coming up to the time when we'll have to be planting our spring bulbs. But there are autumn bulbs too. Now, I've got here a bag of bulbs of colchicums, which flower September time. This is Colchicum speciosum album. White flowers for the white garden, or writing garden. The meadow saffron, which is Colchicum autumnale, is our native colchicum. And thank you very much. The noise is off. And that grows in meadows, but tends to be eliminated because it's poisonous to stock. If those lambs ate this, they really would be very unwell indeed. In fact, after you've handled colchicums, wash your hands. Now, they're not a bulb at all. In fact, they're a corm, but really singular because they've got this tail or rudder at the base, and these are whoppers. Speciosum album is especially big, and it's a good plant because not only has it lovely white flowers, but it's robust. And one of the problems with colchicums is that they tend to be really bashed about by weather. But if you want just one that's a bit more robust, Colchicum speciosum album is a good one. What they really like is sunshine. They open out in the sun, so if you choose a site, whether it be grass or a border, make sure it does get plenty of sun. Now, here in the writing garden, the sun is very bright and it comes through. It's slightly shaded by these apples, but I'm going to give these a bit of a prune in winter. So if I plant these on this side, I think they should perform really well. Now, these corms are enormous, but they do need to be buried deeply. At least 4 inches above the top, and 6 inches is better. So you need a spade, not a trowel. And they're quite expensive, but not ridiculous. They're about £1.50 to £2 plus each one. Now, by planting these today, they will flower this autumn. So if you want to get some, get them in the ground quickly, and then you can enjoy them this year. The soil needs to be rich and quite moist. So although they like sun, they don't like very dry soil. So if you've got very dry, sandy soil, add some leaf mould or garden compost. But the cycle is very much a question of growth of foliage in spring and early summer. That dies back to nothing, and then the flowers emerge. And because the flowers emerge without any foliage, their old-fashioned name was naked ladies.
There was Adam, happy as a man could be, till Eve got him messing with that old apple tree. Ain't that just like a woman? Ain't that just like a woman? Yes, that's that just like a woman, they'll do it every time.
So put the tail in the ground, acts as an anchor, and that will go on growing for years and years. With many bulbs, a cluster or a group often looks much better. But with these colchicums, you do need to give them room. I would allow at least 12 inches between them because they have fairly broad foliage.
Ain't that just like a woman? Ain't that just like a woman? Yes, that's just like a woman. They'll do it every time.
No, I think these will thrive here. There's sunshine, there will be more when I've done my winter pruning. They're sheltered, so they won't get too bashed by the wind and the rain. And of course, they've got marvellous white flowers that will look great with the other white flowers in the writing garden. And the great thing about colchicums is they are a marker of the season. They say autumn. Now, one of the celebrations of late summer, August, for me, are gladioli. They're a plant that I find works well by using the richness and the diversity of their colour range in borders. But we went to visit a grower who grows them on their own, by the hundred. And he's a champion gladioli grower.
It's having that colour and brightness in my life that gladioli can provide that is the attraction. There's little tiny ones that are 1.5 inches across. There are the big beauties that are 8 inches across. Every colour you can imagine. Dark purples, dark reds, it's pure white. So you've got everything that you could really want. I've been growing gladioli now for close on 30 years. The buzz for me is actually growing them to the best of my ability and to the best of the flower's ability. I think the first large show I did, I went to Harrogate, and then that's when things really started taking off. To be comfortable, they need a light sandy soil, really. They also need quite a bit of water because one of the criteria we're looking for is the amount of buds on the actual flower spike. The perfect show flower will have a nice proportion of open flowers and flowers in bud and be a sort of nice teardrop sort of shape. And a little trick of the trade to sort of try and achieve that, you can actually get a little piece of cotton wool and just pop it behind the floret and position it so that it faces the right way. And to actually accentuate the size of the flower, you can actually pop some into the centre there. Do it very gently in the warmth of the day. Don't do it in the early hours of the morning because the petals will crack and it'll break and that will be the flower ruin. Just spreads the petals out, gets some good size onto the actual open floret. Leave it there for a couple of hours, take it out, and then it will actually stay in that new position and form part of what will hopefully be a championship bloom. Years ago, we were always told that gladioli weren't hardy and you should dig them out every winter. For the show grower, that is still the case. They dig them out every winter, but you can actually leave your gladioli in the ground and you might get one bad winter where they may sort of get hit, but the rest of the time they should come up year after year. This one's Andy O. This is a small flowered variety. It's a personal favourite. I've been growing it for about 20 years. It's not very widespread at all. And one of the reasons for that is it's quite prone to diseases and viruses. And for every 5 you plant, you may end up losing 2 or 3 throughout the season. So in a way, it's like a personal conservation project. I like to keep it going. And on top of that, it really riles one of my rivals when I've got this one. The world of gladioli showing can get very competitive, but those rivals are some of my best friends. We meet up probably every weekend during the summer months. We like to see a good flower, whether it's our own or somebody else's. Over a year, I grow 500 plants in the allotment, but I've also got a small stash on my next-door neighbour's garden, a chap called Reg. Everybody should have a Reg. He's kind enough to let me grow my Primulinus types on his garden. They're little beauties, really, and they're probably the closest thing to what exists in the wild. I like them, A, because they're so different to the big blousy ones, but they're a type of flower that really has disappeared out of commercial use now, and they've been kept going by hybridists. So I sort of half grow them just to keep them ticking over and keep them going so that they're still there. There's two secrets to growing gladioli successfully at a national level, and one is TLC, tender loving care. You need to put the time and effort in. And the second one is a very, very understanding family. They know it sort of makes me happy, and I suppose that rubs off on the rest of the family as well.
Seeing Nigel's gladioli in their rows with their intense colour reminds me, actually I'd forgotten this for years, that my mother used to grow gladioli as cut flowers. And they were always grown in the vegetable garden, each with a single stake, in rows, and then cut in these sprays that used to be bought in. And what's the matter? Oh, the boar's in here, sorry. Well, it's over here, Nigel. Look, there. Good boy. Now, gladioli must have sunshine. And one of the most common problems, the most common letters we get here, is the lack of sun, shade. What do you grow in deep shade? I've got a few letters here, and these are just a small representation. I've got a small patch of garden, approximately 2 foot by 3 foot long, at the side of my house. And it's in shade for most of the year, except in high summer. I feel I'm not using it to full potential. Can you tell me what to grow there? And that's Jane Shepherd. And I've got a spruce tree in my garden which has a protection order on it, and underneath is total shade. Can you help, please? Well, yes, I can, because we have exactly this problem here at Longmeadow. This area, which is called rather grandly the Lime Walk, and that's just simply because of the lime trees that I put in there. And we had tulips here in spring, and then in summer it was followed by tended to be bedding plants, but for the last 3-4 years, it's got shadier and shadier, and nothing really thrives. I mean, you can see, this is it, high summer. This is the display. I want to restore it so it looks really good. But to do that, I've got to grow something that will thrive in dry shade. Ferns are the answer. And what I've decided to do is completely change the feel of this part of the garden. Now, this is not something to do lightly. I've thought about this for ages. The Lime Walk is becoming Fern Alley. And I've chosen 2 particular ferns. So we have Dryopteris Felix Mass, and then the very similar, but subtly different, Dryopteris Aphenis. In terms of growing, Aphenis will tolerate more light. Dryopteris Felix Mass you can grow in almost total shade. And both will grow about twice the height of that. So they get up to about 3 foot tall. And the reason why I've chosen this and the other Dryopteris is because they're so architectural. And with the fronds creating their shuttlecock shape and catching the light, this will look fantastic. This is an opportunity rather than a problem. The border is very narrow. The hedge has grown out, the lime trees have grown, the roots are sucking up all the moisture. And of course, if you have only a small area with 2 foot by 3 foot, you could fill it with ferns. Now, there's no need to feed it, no need to add any compost. If your soil is very heavy clay, then maybe adding a bit of leaf mould will help, just to lighten the root run and increase the drainage. And remember to water them in. And if they look particularly dry, until next spring, just give them another water. Now, these plants are not evergreen. so that they will die back and get a bit ragged. Ferns always get a bit beaten about by the weather, but then they can be tidied up, and of course the new fronds will appear in spring. And what I realise this is doing is it's changing part of this garden. It's becoming something else, and I think that's exciting. And it's all part of the fact that ferns are not second-class citizens. They're strong, beautiful plants and should be celebrated as such. And of course, the perfect answer to what seems like a really tricky part of the garden. Now, you might not be planting ferns this weekend, but here are some other things you can be doing. Unlike red currants, which are best pruned in spring, I like to prune black currants immediately after fruiting, and certainly by the end of summer. The idea is to prune out the oldest growth, cutting right down to the ground, which leaves more room for the first and second year shoots that will bear the most fruit next year. Spring cabbage needs to be sown as soon as possible if it's to stand any chance of growing into healthy young plants. Sow them thinly into a seed tray or individual plugs and put them somewhere warm to germinate. They can then be potted on before transplanting to their final position later in October. Coming? Come on. Another job that is small but well worth doing is to deadhead buddleias. This not only improves the appearance of the plant, but also encourages a second flush of flowers, which will provide an important source of nectar for bees and butterflies. The jewel garden really comes into its own at this time of year. At the end of summer, all the colours are richer and more intense, and that's partly through the choice of plants, whether it be the dahlias and the cannas, buddleias and the crocosmia. These all intrinsically have rich colours, but it's also to do with the light, because the light at the end of August and throughout September is lower, and it picks up the velvety richness of these tones. And it is important when you're planning the colour scheme of a garden to think the light that hits it is going to affect it just as much as the choice of colour itself. Now, talking about brightness and colour, there's scarcely a colour of any time of year in any kind of garden that is brighter than the Crocosmia Lucifer. And down at Glebe Cottage, Carol is celebrating Crocosmia in all its glory.
As summer progresses, the garden develops. Everything becomes richer, fuller, riper. The soft pastels of June and early July are replaced by fiery reds, sizzling oranges and brilliant yellows. Crocosmias have arrived. Crocosmias come from South Africa, and they just remind us of the debt our gardens owe to plants gathered from all over the world. This is Crocosmia Gerbe d'Or, sometimes called Colleton fishacre. Just look at these glowing golden flowers and these beautiful bronzy leaves. If you rub the leaves, they smell of saffron, and that's where Crocosmias get their name, from Crocos, the Greek for saffron. They have this wonderful wandering habit. It's very gentle, but it fits in perfectly with a naturalistic approach. They just want to be themselves, but how could you resist growing something like that? That's Emily Mackenzie. Perfection. Mark Wash has been captivated by Crocosmia for almost 15 years. He's been collecting, growing and hybridising new varieties at his nursery in Cornwall and made frequent trips to see the species growing wild in South Africa. What did you feel like the very first time you saw a crocosmia?
Well, I had a shiver down my spine when I saw them, after growing them for so many years in my own garden, and then finally going and seeing them out in the wild. Nothing better, nothing better.
Have you brought any of them back with you?
Seed has been sent for me. I go to photograph them,
Yeah.
and then later on, of course, the seed comes. So maybe a year or two later, then some seed will arrive, and a few years after that, you'll get them into flower.
There's one crocosmia in particular that's got a bit of a bad reputation, though, isn't there?
You'll be talking about Montbritia, won't you? Or the common name, yeah. Yeah, that one's... it was bred back in late 19th century by a chap called Victor Lemain, and he's down in Nancy in France. And he brought together these two here. This one here is one called Potsii, with its pretty little tubular flowers. Doesn't even look like a crocosmia, really.
So dainty, isn't it?
Beautiful little thing.
So somebody collected this
Somebody
and sent
collected
it to
that, yes, they did. And then the cross was made with this one, which is a wide, different flower, very different flower. This lives in the forests of South Africa.
So graceful. Is this aurea?
This is aurea, this one, yeah.
So what did each of them contribute to Montbritia?
Well, you know, this one is an incredibly vigorous plant, and that's what brought the vigour into Montbritia. But this one brought the beautiful, large flowers, and it was the combination of the two that created what we know today.
Yeah. So as much as Montbritia is notorious, I suppose the most famous crocosmia is Lucifer.
Oh, it certainly is. And if you see any other crocosmia in somebody's garden, then it's sure to be those bright, fiery red flowers of Lucifer standing at the back of the border.
So what are its parents?
Well, you know, they came from two different species in the wild. One of them was this one here. This is paniculata. Sometimes it's golden, or sometimes it's red, like this one here. But both of them always have these sort of burnt ember-type buds, and also these elegant flowers, very different to the others we've looked at. And those flowers are shaped just the same shape as the beak, as the malachite sunbird, which flutters around them and pollinates them. It's a wonderful sight to see.
Yeah.
The other parent that created Lucifer was this one here, and this is Masoniorum. But just look at the shape of the flowers. This time, you've got a long, arching stem with up to 30 buds on there, just a gorgeous plant ready to grow in the garden.
And all opening in succession from the base down. If you really want your crocosmias to perform, then it's essential to carry out a very simple operation every couple of years. Crocosmias make chains of corms. The new one builds on top of the old one. Now, you'd do this in March, so there wouldn't be any shoots there, but the corms, on the other hand, would be big and fat and raring to go. Here are the old corms, probably 2 years old, 3 years old. On top of that, a new one was made that produced last year's flower, and all you do is literally snap that top one off. Dig your hole, make sure it's full of good compost, sink the corm in, cover it over, and plant them just a few inches apart so you get this lovely natural flowing effect. Crocosmias have evolved for thousands and thousands of years in their native South Africa, and they bring brilliant colour to the late summer border. Just when you think it's all over, they say it's just getting going.
This is the best time of year to take cuttings. That's because plants have put on new growth that's got lots of energy. They've hardened off enough so that they don't just wither and die within minutes, but they've got enough freshness in them to react, if they're put in the right conditions, to produce roots. And what's good about taking cuttings now is that they will root, and then you can store quite small plants over winter, ready for growing next spring. Whereas on plants like pelargoniums, storing them in any quantity can take up a lot of space. Now, the secret of taking pelargonium cuttings is to take your cutting as near to the growing tip as possible. There's no virtue. If you have this is Lady Plymouth, one of the scented leaf pelargoniums, and just for your benefit, you have to believe me on this, that smells wonderfully fragrant, fantastically lemony, musky, fabulous. And If I took a cutting, this is new material here, right down to there, I'd have a big cutting, but it wouldn't necessarily give me a bigger plant. What we're looking for is new, non-flowering growth, and as near to the top of the growth as possible. So if I just snip this off there, like that, and if I left it like that, there's an awful lot of leaf, and that's going to lose moisture. So I need to reduce the amount of leaf to give it a fighting chance until it's produced roots, which then can feed moisture back into the plant. So as ever, with a sharp knife, I'm going to take that leaf off there, and this one off here. Now that's fine. We've got plenty of foliage to feed it, but not so much to stress it and strain it before it's got roots. Now the compost mix for any cuttings wants to be very free draining. What I've mixed up here is some compost mixed with grit and vermiculite. Take a pencil and pop that in the edge there like that. And I would expect that to root. Now, if I take another cutting from here, like that, and there, and there, and I'm just going to cut this below the leaf node. Now, in my experience, that will take easily. However, I have been told that to boost the striking rate and also the root growth of pelargonium cuttings, you can use vitamin C. And all you do is take a vitamin C tablet, the type of which you can buy almost anywhere, pop it in some water so it dissolves, and then dip your cutting into the water. What I'm going to do is do one whole pot of identical cuttings that have used vitamin C and one pot that hasn't. We'll monitor them and see which one grows better plants. This pot, they've been dipped in vitamin C. This pot, they haven't had anything at all. We'll see. Now, I shall water those, but put them somewhere warm and dry, because it's important to keep the roots moist, as and when they form, but the leaves dry. So don't put them in a polythene bag or a mist propagator if you've got one. And then when you see new growth, we can think about pricking them out and growing them on. But that's it for today. I'll see you here at Longmeadow next time. Till then, bye-bye.